I'm here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, Theresa May is bringing up her deal to the House of Commons once again for a third go-around. What do you expect to happen this time with her negotiated deal with the EU?
Let us first of all make an important point. This is a deal which has been rejected previously by the House of Commons in January by a majority of 230 votes. It was rejected a few weeks ago by the House of Commons with a majority of around 150 votes. It is hugely unpopular across the country. Those who voted leave say that it commits Britain to a permanent customs union with the EU, which it cannot leave without the EU's agreement. That is a view which has been supported by the government's legal advisor, the Attorney General. It is also very unpopular with Remainers, who say rightly that it is a far worse deal than the deal that Britain has now of being a full member of the EU, when it is at least a rule maker, as opposed to being just a rule taker, which is what it would be if Theresa May's deal was enacted. The only person who likes this deal is Theresa May, and she comes back repeatedly to the House of Commons proposing the same deal again and again and again for a third time, which the House of Commons has rejected, which her party dislikes, which the Labour Party dislikes, which the country dislikes, and she has pursued it with an obsession that reminds some people, and this is a comparison that more and more people are making, of Captain Ahab's pursuit of Moby Dick. Now, what will happen next week? Firstly, Britain, the British Parliament, when it rejected Theresa May's deal, passed a series of votes. There were two votes in which it voted that it would not agree to a no-deal outcome under any circumstances. One was passed by just 4 votes. The second, pushed on it by Theresa May herself, was passed by 42 votes. That is not binding. The second thing it did, it's not legally binding. That's the second thing it did, is that it voted to authorize the government to apply to the European Union for an Article 50 extension. What Theresa May is now saying is that if Parliament doesn't pass her deal on a third occasion, this deal which has been repeatedly rejected, she will apply to the European Union not for a 3-month extension, as she has previously talked about, but for a very much longer extension, essentially to negotiate this thing all over again. She does this in the full knowledge that the kind of extension she's talking about, with some people speaking of up to 2 years, makes Brexit extremely unlikely to happen. So what she is in effect doing is she is putting the pro-Brexit MPs in her own party on notice that unless they vote for her deal in a few days' time, the likelihood is that Brexit won't happen at all. Now, I am not sure what is going to happen. Many of these MPs, these pro-Brexit MPs in her own party, are now extremely angry. Some of them are saying that they're going to still vote against this deal because they don't consider it to be a proper Brexit at all, and that they would rather risk the danger of there being no Brexit rather than accept this deal. But I think that enough of them will probably in the end come round to get this deal passed through gritted teeth in the face of huge opposition in Parliament and across the whole country. Essentially, Theresa May blackmailing the House of Commons, her MPs and the country to get this deal that nobody wants passed.
So just so I understand exactly what's going on here. On the one hand, Theresa May has negotiated a Brexit deal which essentially keeps the UK in the EU, but without any voting rights. In other words, they're stuck in the customs union. They're stuck with EU regulations, but they have no say how to shape those regulations.
Correct.
Or it's incredible. Or she's saying, let's just stay in the EU because I'm just going to create a situation where we indefinitely postpone this for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and from that point on, it'll just go on and on.
Exactly.
These are the options that she's given the House of Commons.
That is exactly correct. That is exactly what she has done. You missed out a very important point, that not only will Britain remain under her deal, in effect within the EU, but with no opportunity to shape its policies or its regulations, but it cannot leave the EU without the EU's agreement. At least as a full member of the EU, it can, in theory, do so. So that is the options that she is now giving to her party and to the House of Commons.
So stay without any authority, or stay.
Exactly. I mean, that, to my way of thinking, is a total betrayal of the mandate she was given by the British people in the referendum of 2016, which said very clearly and very simply, we want to leave the EU.
Was this a cunning display put on by Theresa May here? Was this all part of the plan, or did she just kind of stumble into this?
I still believe that she stumbled into it. I read a very interesting article today by a very respected and honourable leaver called Charles Moore, who writes for the Daily Telegraph. He's a columnist there. And he makes the same point. He also thinks that she stumbled into it. What both he and I think is that in her heart of hearts, Theresa May is a Remainer. She has never taken leave as a serious option, and she has never really negotiated in good faith for a proper leave. So she has ended up with a worse deal than I think the one that she originally intended, which, as I think, was stay within the customs union, but without this backstop, this Irish backstop that is the source of all this trouble, and at the same time with restrictions on immigration. I think that was her original plan. But what she has ended up with, what she has negotiated, is something which I think she prefers to a simple exit from the EU on the basis of no deal. Now, to get a sense of how treacherous, and that was your word, and it's one I'm going to repeat, that is, Theresa May spoke for several months before calling the June 2017 general election and campaigned in the June 2017 general election on the basis that no deal was better than a bad deal. We now see that she never intended that at all.
Well, she's a politician. She was lying. That's obvious.
She was lying.
Yeah.
She's been lying continuously. She's lied at every single turn in this matter. She's lied to the House of Commons. She's lied to the party, the Conservative Party, and she's lied to her own country.
Well, I mean, she's been jerking around the entire country for the past 2 years.
Yes.
Only so that it gets to a point where you're 2 weeks away from the March 29th deadline, and she's presented the MPs with essentially two different flavors of remaining in the EU. That's correct. She hasn't even presented a leave option. What can the MPs do? What can the British people do?
Right. What I think the British MPs should do next week is they should reject Theresa May's deal. And then the Conservative MPs should do that which they have repeatedly failed to do. And let us quickly add that the Conservative Party is equally to blame for this disaster, which is finally and conclusively remove Theresa May from the position of British Prime Minister, which she occupies. What we should then do is bringing a politician, a genuine leaver, make that person Prime Minister and get on with Brexit and get it done fast. Because it is quite clear that this Prime Minister, Theresa May, will never do it. Alex, have you and I said that on programmes that we have appeared together? How many times did I say that I thought Theresa May's situation, her position, was becoming or had become untenable and she would have to go? But always and repeatedly, the Conservative Party, instead of making the decision which it must make, if it is to deliver Brexit and keep faith with its voters, which is to remove Theresa May, has drawn back from doing it. Now it has to do it. Otherwise, there is a real probability, there in fact a certainty, that we're not going to get Brexit at all.
But they're not going to do it, are they?
Well, I would say the truth, which is I don't think so. But you asked me what I think they should do.
Because they don't want to leave either. They don't want to leave either.
A lot of them don't want to leave either. In which case, we're not going to get any kind of Brexit. I mean, if that's what's going to happen, I think there's a reasonable chance we will see Theresa May's deal pass. But if we don't, we will, as you correctly said, we will get this thing kicked down, into the long grass, and in a year or two's time, it'll just be quietly dropped. The only thing that can happen, the only thing that will change the situation, is if Nigel Farage finally acts on what he said he would do, which is get his party, this new party that he's talking about, set up and starts campaigning hard in Conservative and Labour constituencies, winning votes against them, as he was doing in the run-up to the 2016 referendum, and that way get Brexit back on track. I mentioned the mistake the Conservatives made, which is to stick by Theresa May. I have to also refer to the mistake that Nigel Farage made, which is the one we talked about on a previous programme, which he took the disastrous decision of quitting the leadership of UKIP, his own party, after the 2016 referendum happened, thinking that it was all a done thing, when, of course, as it turns out, it wasn't.
And nor was it ever going to happen. I mean, I think this was all part of the plan. One way or another, the EU was not going to have a Brexit, and the MPs, the government of the UK, was not going to fulfill the people's wish.
Well,
I mean, it's clear. It's clear.
Yes. Well, I mean, they clearly haven't done. I mean, and as I said, I mean, the people you really must point your finger at, if you really want to look at this disaster, is obviously Theresa May, but also the British parliamentarians who have, as I said, sabotaged this thing, and first and foremost, the members, the Conservative MPs, the MPs of Theresa May's party, who have enabled her to do this thing.
I mean, give me an effing break. 3 votes? She's taken this deal 3 times now?
Well, can I just say something, Alex? That is unprecedented. That has never happened before, to my knowledge, in British parliamentary history. I'm going to add something else. I think it is in breach of parliamentary rules. I think that there is actually a parliamentary rule which says that the government cannot present the same proposal for a vote to Parliament in the same parliamentary session. Yet that is what Theresa May is proposing to do.
And she's waiting for the outcome to be what exactly? I mean, she's won either way. That's my point. I'm trying to rationalize this. She's won.
Yes, I mean,
she got what she wanted, because
she got what she wanted.
They vote for her deal, or it gets delayed. So she's won, essentially.
Exactly. Well, indeed. I mean, the one thing I would say is that, of course, her reputation is destroyed. I mean, she is.
She doesn't care, Alex. She'll get a cushy job in Brussels or something, and that's that.
She well, indeed, and And the other thing is to say, I mean, her position as Prime Minister, she won't stay as Prime Minister for very long. But in terms of the outcome, I mean, you've got it exactly right. I mean, she's either going to get a deal, which is, I think, what she would prefer, actually. I think she would prefer to be the Prime Minister who got this deal through because she's invested so much of herself in it, or she gets no Brexit at all.
Yeah, but the deal is essentially to remain in the EU as well. It's actually even worse. I would say the best outcome now is actually to stay in the EU as a full member and at least have some sway in the policies.
It is. And of course, there are some people who are saying, and this comes back to something that we said in a programme before, that of course, a Britain that remains in the EU in these circumstances is going to be a very angry and very difficult Britain. Perhaps not the political class in London, but the country will be. And as I said, this story is not over. I mean, as night follows day, there will be more agitation going down the line for Britain to leave the EU. As I said, Nigel Farage will organise his party. Leave opinion will harden within the Conservative Party. I think whichever leader succeeds May is almost certain to be a leaver. So, as I said, the story is far from over. But far from over doesn't mean that Britain will leave the EU in any satisfactory condition, either in a few weeks or a few months, or indeed in any foreseeable frame of time.
Yeah, so this battle looks like it's coming to a disappointing end.
Well, indeed.
But
indeed,
you know, the war is still being
the war
fought.
the war is still fought, and I suspect it will intensify. To come to a point that you said to me and asked me in an earlier programme, I mean, what you asked me whether I was angry. I'm very angry. And of course, other people in the country will be equally so. I mean, many will be much more so.
I think the whole world is angry.
Yes,
everyone who's watching from the outside is furious at what's been going on.
I think they're also incredulous at the incompetence and frankly, self-centeredness of the British Parliament and political elite, and its inability to take forward the programme it was handed by the British people, and the extreme anti-democratic instincts that it has shown.
Well, they have a disdain for democracy. That's what they've shown. Well,
clearly. And can I say that is, for me, the single thing that upsets me most, because that referendum, the question in that referendum was completely clear. And what the people were promised was that if they voted to leave would indeed happen. There was never any qualification or doubt about that. That was the basis upon which people voted. They voted in good faith, and they've been betrayed, and they're entitled to feel so.
They've been betrayed, and I just feel like I feel like 2 years have just been lost on Theresa May, literally just jerking around the entire UK, the entire world with this negotiation with the EU. I can't get my mind around it that this was this was how it was planned to be.
Well, I mean, the other consequence of all of this is that, of course, government, the actual business of government in Britain for the last 2 years, especially the last year, has essentially ground to a stop. There's now massive divisions within the Conservative Party, which will not heal anytime soon. The Conservative Party being the key political party that is the political centre around which is Britain's political system has traditionally revolved. So we're now going to see a situation where we have a broken Britain, deeply antagonised, a far less effective government, and with many, many people outside the country concluding that the system isn't working for them anymore and that it really pays no attention to what they say or even what they vote for. And frankly, that is a recipe for instability in a country up to now famously stable. So, I mean, to me, this is a total disaster, and it's incredible to me that the British political elite has not only allowed it to happen, but in some cases has actually worked towards it happening.
Yeah, all the people that have made this happen, they're going to get a nice big promotion. That's for damn sure. Maybe not a promotion in the British government, but they're going to get rewarded for the betrayal of the people's vote. Real quickly, yes. Alexander, you can add to that as well. But real quickly, as we wrap it up, if there are elections, would a Labour government handle this any differently?
Yes, I think it would, and I'll tell you what I think would happen if a Labour government were elected now. But of course, time is now very short. I mean, there would have to be a general election very quickly. But if there were a general election, I think Jeremy Corbyn has made very clear what kind of a Brexit he wants. He wants a Brexit in which Britain stays in the customs union, stays in the European single market, accepts free movement, because that's the logic of what those two positions imply, but where there would be no Irish backstop. So Britain would be able to leave at some point in the future without having to get permission from the EU. Now, that is a better outcome than the one Theresa May has negotiated. I'm not saying it is the optimal one. I'm certainly not saying it's the one people voted for in 2016, but it would be a better one than the one we are being presented with now. Having said that, I don't think there is going to be a general election very soon. And incidentally, because of the crisis within the Labour Party, which there's been over these last few weeks, I don't think it's now an absolute foregone conclusion that Labour would win it, though I think they probably would.
All part of the plan. All part of. I'm starting to think that this was all one big setup, including what happened with Labour with that independent group breaking off, in order to make sure that Labour also doesn't have any conceivable possibility to thwart Theresa May's plan to keep the
there you
UK
go. I mean, we go back to that video we did a few weeks ago when I said before the independent group was set up that this was the last throw to stop Brexit, was to set up this independent group to weaken both the Conservative and Labour parties going forward, and it succeeded. And, you know, I'm apportioning blame to many people. I think Jeremy Corbyn's decision to agree to a second referendum was a huge mistake. I said that many times. I think it's lost Labour support in the Leave voting constituencies where most Labour MPs were elected. I think it's the reason why Labour has now fallen behind the Conservatives in the opinion polls. I think Jeremy Corbyn knows it. Over the last couple of days, he's tried to row back on it, but I think the damage has been done.
Everyone's been duped, Alexander. They covered all their bases. The EU and the Remainers covered all their bases.
Well, can I also say something, which is, of course, it's a point which we've discussed many times. Nobody comes out well out of this affair. Nobody. Certainly not in Britain.
The EU comes out real nice.
Well, the EU has won. I mean, because they were up against an opponent who didn't know his own mind.
Was it an opponent, or was it a partner in crime?
Well, either that, or as I said, somebody who didn't know his own mind. You go into a negotiation with the EU, and you know we're from Greece and Cyprus, and we know what it's like negotiating with the EU. If you go into that negotiation looking for compromise, you'll be bulldozed, and that is what the British, not just Theresa May, but even a lot of Leavers, people who were Leave ministers in Theresa May's cabinet, that is what they did. People like Boris Johnson, Michael Gove, all of those people, instead of taking a strong line and saying that the only acceptable deal was one which took Britain fully out of the EU, they went along with this negotiating strategy.
There was some negotiation.
Well, there was no negotiation, by the way, on the deal, on the withdrawal agreement. You can read Tom Longo on this, is that, in fact, it was all dictated by Angela Merkel, which wouldn't surprise me at all.
Do you believe that Merkel really had that much of a sway in this?
Yes, I do, actually. Theresa May was meeting with Angela Merkel repeatedly, and it is known very well that Jean-Claude Juncker, who is the European Commission president, does exactly what Merkel tells him. So I don't think I can well believe it. I mean, I don't know it for a fact, but I think it is highly likely that Tom Longo is right.
Unbelievable.
No.
Just unbelievable. All right, Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran, thank you very much. Guys, if you like this video, click on the subscribe button down below and click on the notifications bell to get notifications every time we push out a new video. Visit the Duran shop, pick up a t-shirt, help support the Duran. In the description box down below, you'll find links to our PayPal and Patreon pages. Donate to the Duran. It really helps us out a lot. And go to theduran.com and see what Alexander is reading every day. Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran, thank you very much. Till next time, everybody, take care.